31-year-old Terrell Nelson is accused of shooting 34-year-old Cantrelle Hayes-Ross the night before Thanksgiving. She later died on December 2nd. Savannah police say that she was shot on Augusta Avenue at a daycare she owned. Today, a homicide detective testified that Nelson's SUV was seen outside that daycare before the shooting. And a friend told police that Hayes-Ross was arguing with Nelson before she came outside and said, quote, "He shot me."
"You're ugly." Those were the last words Cantrelle Hayes-Ross heard before gunshots shattered the silence of her daycare center on Thanksgiving Eve 2024. The 34-year-old entrepreneur had been preparing a holiday meal at Friend Zone Learning, the childcare business she'd built from scratch. Her former boyfriend, Terrell Nelson, showed up unannounced. What began as an argument quickly escalated when Cantrell refused his desperate plea for reconciliation. In the flash of a moment, Nelson pulled out a gun. Cantrell burst through the front door of her daycare, crying out, "He shot me," before collapsing to the ground. But Nelson wasn't finished. As she lay wounded, he fired several more shots before calmly walking to his car and driving away. Behind him, he left a woman who had dedicated her life to nurturing children dying on the sidewalk outside the place she loved most. By the time police arrived, they found Cantrell lying outside her business with multiple gunshot wounds. Despite emergency efforts, she died at the scene. The investigation quickly focused on 31-year-old Terrell Nelson, her former boyfriend. 4 days after the shooting, Nelson walked into the Savannah Police Department claiming he wanted to clear his name. What happened to him after then would definitely thrill you. What makes this case particularly disturbing isn't just the holiday timing or the public location. It's how a relationship that once held promise ended in such violence. How a once loved woman became an ugly thing in his eye, and how a woman who dedicated her life to caring for children lost her future in the place she built to nurture others. The story of Cantrell and Terrell reveals how quickly anger can turn deadly, especially when firearms and failed relationships mix. Their final confrontation lasted only minutes, but its consequences still echo through families and a community till date. Stories like Cantrell's need to be told, not just to honor her memory, but to possibly save someone else caught in a dangerous situation. This is Crazy Dark Files. We have more crazy cases to bring to light. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss an exposed case.
Savannah police have arrested Terrell Nelson for the murder of his former girlfriend, Cantrelle Hayes-Ross. She was just 34 years old. Her family heartbroken by this sudden loss and relieved that Nelson is now behind bars. Savannah police say Cantrelle Hayes-Ross was shot to death on Thanksgiving morning at the daycare center she owned, Friend Zone Learning on Augusta Avenue. SPD responded based on a ShotSpotter notification, but it was too late to save Hayes-Ross from her injuries. This man, Terrell Nelson, is now facing murder, aggravated assault, and parole violation charges in relation to her shooting death.
Long before tragedy struck on that Thanksgiving Eve, Cantrelle Hayes-Ross was known throughout Savannah as a woman with an infectious laugh and boundless energy. At 34, she had already accomplished what many only dream of: building a successful business from the ground up that aligned perfectly with her passion. Friend Zone Learning wasn't just a daycare, it was Cantrell's vision brought to life. Located in a modest building on the 1400 block of Augusta Avenue, the center quickly became a trusted haven for working parents throughout Savannah. The colorful exterior, with hand-painted butterflies and flowers, reflected the vibrant personality of its owner. She decided she just wanted to go into the child care field and went from being trained in child care to her own daycare, her father recalled during a candlelight vigil held days after her death. She said, "I'm going to do it, and I didn't hesitate. I knew she was going to do it." What made Friend Zone Learning special wasn't just the curriculum or the clean, welcoming environment, it was Cantrell herself. Parents often arrived to pick up their children only to find them reluctant to leave, captivated by Miss Cantrell's storytelling or creative activities. These kids were her whole life, her mother shared, wiping away tears. They were her life.
She decided she just wanted to go into the child care field and went from her being trained in child care to her wanting her own daycare. She said, "My mama do it." I didn't hesitate. I knew she was going to do it. And these kids were her life. They were her life.
Former employees described how Cantrell would often use her own money to buy supplies or treats for the children when budgets were tight. During the pandemic, she personally delivered activity packets to families who couldn't afford internet access for virtual learning. She was an outgoing person, her father said. She was really loud and always the fun of the bunch. She just was a great person all over. There wasn't nothing she wouldn't do. This generosity extended beyond her business. Friends described how Cantrell would drop everything to help someone in need, whether it was providing emergency child care for a neighbor, organizing fundraisers for local families facing medical bills, or simply offering a listening ear and shoulder to cry on. Cantrell didn't just talk about community, she lived it every day, said a longtime friend who requested anonymity. She believed in lifting others up, especially children. She saw potential in every child who walked through her doors. Her passion for childcare wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. Growing up with younger siblings and cousins, Cantrell had always been the one organizing games and activities. Former classmates remembered her declaring in high school that she would someday open her own daycare center. When Cantrell set her mind to something, there was no stopping her, her cousin remarked. She researched everything about childcare regulations, business licenses, educational approaches. She wanted to do it right. By all accounts, she had succeeded. Friend Zone Learning had a waiting list of families hoping to enroll their children, and Cantrell had recently begun exploring the possibility of opening a second location. On November 27, 2024, the day before Thanksgiving, Cantrell arrived at her daycare center early. The facility was closed for the holiday, but she had plans to prepare food for the following day's family gathering. She had invited her sister over earlier that day, and they had spent time together before Cantrell headed to the daycare. As evening approached, Cantrell sat outside with a friend, enjoying a glass of wine and discussing her plans for the holiday weekend. She periodically went inside to check on the food she was preparing in the daycare kitchen. She had no way of knowing that someone else had entered the building, someone who once claimed to love her, but whose feelings had twisted into something dark and dangerous. Someone who was about to turn a day of Thanksgiving into one of unspeakable tragedy. Behind Cantrell's radiant smile and professional success lay a complicated personal life. Her relationship with 31-year-old Terrell Nelson had begun like many others, with promise, affection, and shared dreams. Friends recalled seeing them together at community events. Nelson's arm protectively around Cantrell's shoulders, both laughing easily. They seemed good together at first, remembered a mutual friend. Terrell would show up at the daycare with lunch for her or help with maintenance around the building. He seemed proud of what she had built. But relationships that begin with fireworks can sometimes end in smoke and ash. He started showing up unannounced at her workplace, testified a former employee during preliminary hearings. At first, Cantrell would smile and introduce him to the parents. Later, you could see the tension in her shoulders when he appeared. Text messages recovered from Cantrell's phone painted a disturbing picture of a relationship deteriorating over time. What began as expressions of concern, just checking where you are and who are you with, evolved into demands. Send me a photo to prove where you are, and why aren't you answering my calls? By early November 2024, Cantrell had made the difficult decision to end the relationship. According to her sister's testimony, Cantrell had confided that Nelson's jealousy had become suffocating. She told me, "I can't live like this anymore. I'm constantly walking on eggshells." The breakup wasn't clean. Nelson reportedly refused to accept it was over, alternating between tearful pleas for reconciliation and cold silence. He would appear at places he knew Cantrell frequented, her favorite coffee shop, the grocery store near her home, even her parents' house, claiming these encounters were coincidental. She changed her routines, started varying when she'd arrive at the daycare, her father later told investigators. She didn't want to worry us, but looking back, The signs were there. What many didn't know was that Cantrell had quietly begun documenting these encounters. A folder on her laptop, discovered after her death, contained dated entries describing Nelson's behavior, screenshots of concerning messages, and notes about witnesses who had seen him following her. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, Cantrell had taken the significant step of changing the locks at both her home and the daycare. Security camera footage showed Nelson attempting to use his old key at the daycare's back entrance 3 days before the holiday, then leaving visibly agitated when it didn't work. She was doing everything right, said a domestic violence advocate who later reviewed the case. Documentation, changing locks, telling trusted people about her concerns. The tragedy is that sometimes, even when victims take all the recommended precautions, it's not enough.
Nelson is no stranger to law enforcement. This is the 10th time he's been incarcerated. His most recent charges back in 2018. Records show he served 3 years for an armed robbery and aggravated assault, also in Savannah. Nelson was on trial for murder after turning himself into police back in 2013. Nelson and another man were charged with fatally shooting a man on his front porch back in 2013. Both men were later acquitted. Police haven't yet said what the motive or the circumstances were surrounding this shooting. Hayes-Ross's family says Cantrell was passionate about her career, and they're devastated she lost her life at the place she loved so much.
The day before Thanksgiving, Cantrell had seemed relaxed and hopeful. She told her sister that Nelson had finally stopped contacting her, and she was looking forward to the holiday. She even mentioned potentially dating again in the new year. "I think I'm finally free," she texted a close friend that afternoon. She never knew it would be one of her last messages. What no one realized was that Nelson had been watching the daycare that day. Police later recovered surveillance footage from a business across the street, showing his car parked there for hours, engine off, windows tinted. As darkness fell on that Thanksgiving Eve, Cantrell moved between the kitchen and the outdoor patio, preparing food and occasionally stepping outside for fresh air, completely unaware of what was about to unfold. But what happened on that Thanksgiving night would shock the entire Savannah community and leave a scar on the heart of a city preparing to give thanks. November 27, 2024 began as a day of preparation and anticipation. Across Savannah, families were stocking refrigerators with turkeys and hams. Children were crafting hand-traced paper turkeys, and the city was settling into the warm embrace of holiday spirit. For Cantrelle Hayes-Ross, the day had started early. She had risen before dawn to begin her extensive Thanksgiving preparations. Her family had come to expect her elaborate holiday spreads, mac and cheese with the perfect crispy top, collard greens simmered with smoked turkey wings, and her famous sweet potato pie that had won a local baking contest 3 years running. She always cooked enough to feed an army, her sister Janelle testified. And she insisted on doing most of it herself at the daycare kitchen because it was bigger than her home kitchen. What the Hayes family didn't expect that day was Terrell Nelson showing up unannounced at Janelle's doorstep around 2 p.m. asking for Cantrell. He seemed agitated, kept shifting his weight from foot to foot, Janelle recalled during the preliminary hearing. "I told him Cantrell wasn't there, but he insisted on waiting. He sat in his car outside for almost an hour." Phone records show that Cantrell had called Nelson at 3:17 p.m. According to Janelle, who overheard part of the conversation, Cantrell's tone was firm but not angry. "I heard her say, 'I told you I would meet you at the daycare later, not now, I'm busy,'" Janelle testified. She didn't sound scared, just annoyed. This wasn't the only unexpected encounter that day. Security footage from Wheaton Street Liquors, recovered during the investigation, showed Nelson approaching Cantrell in the parking lot at 4:43 p.m. as she was placing a shopping bag in her trunk. She came in and bought a bottle of wine and some mixers, the store clerk later told detectives. She was in good spirits, mentioned she was hosting Thanksgiving. Then this guy pulled up right as she was leaving. The footage showed a brief conversation between them. Body language experts who reviewed the tape noted Cantrell's defensive posture, arms crossed, maintaining distance, while Nelson repeatedly stepped closer, gesturing emphatically. "You can see her checking her watch several times," noted Detective Simmons during the evidence review. Classic sign someone is trying to end an unwanted interaction. By 6 p.m., Cantrell had arrived at Friend Zone Learning. Her sister had helped her transport food earlier in the day, and now she was alone, putting finishing touches on dishes and preparing others. She had texted several friends that evening, including a photo of her beautifully arranged sweet potato pies with the caption, "Ready for tomorrow, blessed and thankful." No one could have predicted that within hours, police would be securing that same kitchen as a crime scene, and those pies would remain untouched, as silent witnesses to the horror that unfolded. What warning signs do you think people should watch for in relationships? Share your thoughts below. As the evening progressed, Cantrell moved between tasks with the efficiency of someone accustomed to managing multiple responsibilities. Outside, the November darkness had settled over Savannah, and the occasional headlights passing by cast momentary beams through the daycare windows. One set of headlights would stop, and with them, so would Cantrell's future. Cantrelle Hayes-Ross had transformed the daycare's outdoor play area into a makeshift patio oasis. String lights twinkled overhead, and portable heaters pushed back against the November chill. Cantrell had invited her longtime friend Desiree Williams to join her while she finished her holiday cooking. "It was so peaceful," Williams testified, her voice breaking. "We had wine, music playing softly. Cantrell kept going inside to check on her dishes, then coming back out to continue our conversation." Williams described how they reminisced about past Thanksgivings, shared gossip about mutual friends, and discussed Cantrell's plans to expand her business in the coming year. The evening had a celebratory feel. Cantrell had mentioned feeling lighter since ending things with Nelson. "She told me she was finally sleeping through the night again," Williams recalled. "She seemed happy, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in months." Around 11:40 p.m., according to Williams' testimony, Cantrell went inside to check her macaroni and cheese. Williams remained outside, scrolling through her phone and enjoying the quiet night. What happened next was pieced together through Williams' testimony, physical evidence, and the partial recording from a security camera across the street. Williams heard the back door open and close, followed by voices, Cantrell's rising in surprise, then a deeper voice she recognized as Nelson's. Initially, the conversation seemed calm. "I could hear him saying something about how they were going to part ways," Williams testified. "His tone wasn't angry at first. I thought maybe they were having a mature conversation about the breakup." Williams described how she considered going inside but decided to give them privacy. "I thought it might be good for them to have closure," she said, wiping tears from her eyes. "That's the decision I'll regret for the rest of my life." Within minutes, the conversation shifted. Williams heard Cantrell's voice rise, "You need to leave now." Then Nelson's voice, suddenly louder, "You think you're better than me? You think you can just throw me away?" Williams had just stood up to intervene when she heard the first gunshot. "It was so loud," she testified. "Then I heard Cantrell scream, and more shots. Pop, 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 one right after another." The security footage, though grainy and captured from a distance, showed Williams frozen on the patio, then rushing toward the daycare's front entrance. Simultaneously, the daycare's front door burst open and Cantrell stumbled out, clutching her abdomen. "Shot me," she gasped, collapsing onto the concrete walkway. "Terrell shot me." Williams' frantic 911 call, played during the preliminary hearing, captured the chaos of those moments, her desperate attempts to stop the bleeding, her pleas for Cantrell to stay conscious, the sound of tires screeching as a vehicle sped away. Precisely 23 seconds before Williams' call, Savannah's ShotSpotter system had already detected the gunfire and automatically alerted police. Officers were en route when Williams' call came through, upgrading the response to a shots fired with victim down scenario. First responders arrived within 4 minutes, but for Cantrelle Hayes-Ross it was already too late. The medical examiner confirmed that one of the bullets had struck a major artery. Even with immediate medical intervention, her chances of survival would have been minimal. As dawn broke on Thanksgiving Day, the daycare that had been filled with children's laughter became the center of a murder investigation. Yellow crime scene tape fluttered in the morning breeze, a macabre contrast to the cheerful decorations visible through the windows. Inside, Thanksgiving dishes sat abandoned. a turkey partially carved, cranberry sauce congealing in its dish, and 4 perfect sweet potato pies that would never be served. But the evidence at the scene would tell an even more disturbing story, one that suggested Nelson's actions that night weren't a spontaneous crime of passion, but something far more calculated and cold-blooded. As dawn broke on Thanksgiving Day, the Savannah Police Department was already deep into their investigation. First responders had arrived at Friend Zone Learning Center shortly after midnight, finding Cantrelle Hayes-Ross with fatal gunshot wounds. Despite their efforts, she was pronounced dead at the scene. The evidence told a brutal story. Investigators methodically documented and collected 14 shell casings scattered throughout the crime scene, 4 inside the daycare near the kitchen area, 9 outside where Cantrell had collapsed, and 12 bullet fragments embedded in walls, furniture, and, tragically, in Cantrell's body. All were .44 caliber bullets, all fired from the same weapon. The distribution pattern of the casings revealed that the shooter had begun firing inside the daycare, pursued Cantrell as she fled toward the front door, and continued shooting even after she had fallen. This wasn't a single shot fired in anger. This was a relentless attack. As the forensic team processed the scene, other officers began the immediate search for Terrell Nelson, who had been quickly identified as the primary suspect based on witness testimony and Cantrell's own dying declaration. His vehicle was spotted on traffic cameras leaving Savannah, but then the trail went cold. For the next 3 days, as families across America gathered for Thanksgiving meals, Nelson remained at large. The Savannah Police Department issued public alerts with his description and vehicle information, warning that he should be considered armed and dangerous. Then came the unexpected development that surprised even veteran officers. On December 1st, Nelson walked into the Savannah Police Headquarters and surrendered himself. According to police reports, he claimed he was there to clear his name regarding Cantrell's murder. Nelson was immediately taken into custody and questioned. During the interview, his account of events changed multiple times. He initially denied being at the daycare on the night of the murder, then claimed he had been invited there by Cantrell. His final version suggested that Cantrell had a weapon and it discharged during a struggle, a claim that investigators quickly determined was inconsistent with the physical evidence at the scene. The Chatham County District Attorney's Office formally charged Nelson with murder, aggravated assault, possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony, and a parole violation stemming from a previous conviction. Court records showed that Nelson had a prior conviction for aggravated assault in 2019 and was on parole at the time of Cantrell's murder. As investigators continued their work, they uncovered evidence suggesting the shooting wasn't a spontaneous act. Nelson's movements in the days leading up to the murder, his multiple appearances at locations where Cantrell was present, and the number of shots fired all pointed to something more calculated. The community response was immediate and powerful. A candlelight vigil held outside Friend Zone Learning Center drew hundreds of Savannah residents, including parents of children who had attended the daycare. Many brought handmade signs with messages like "Justice for Cantrell" and "Stop Domestic Violence." Local domestic violence advocacy groups pointed to the case as a tragic example of how dangerous the period immediately following a breakup can be for victims of relationship abuse. They noted that Cantrell had taken many of the recommended safety precautions, including changing locks and documenting concerning behavior, yet still became a victim. As the investigation files were prepared for the prosecutor's office, one detail stood out to everyone involved: the holiday setting of the crime. The Thanksgiving decorations made by children's hands, the partially prepared holiday meal, and the timing of the murder created a stark contrast that underscored the senselessness of the violence. For the detectives working the case, the evidence they gathered would become the foundation for seeking justice for Cantrelle Hayes-Ross, a woman whose life was cut short just as she was preparing to give thanks. As investigators built their case against Terrell Nelson, his past began to emerge like shadows from behind closed doors. What they found painted a disturbing portrait of escalating violence that stretched back more than a decade. Court records revealed that Nelson's first encounter with the criminal justice system came at age 19, when he was arrested for simple battery following a fight at a local nightclub. He received probation, but it wouldn't be his last brush with the law. By 2016, Nelson had accumulated charges for drug possession, criminal trespass, and another battery charge involving a former girlfriend who later dropped the charges. The pattern was becoming clear to investigators: a history of volatility, particularly in romantic relationships. The most significant red flag came in 2019, when Nelson was convicted of aggravated assault after attacking a man he believed was involved with his then-girlfriend. The victim suffered a broken jaw and orbital fracture. Nelson served 18 months of a 3-year sentence before being released on parole in early 2021. At the time of Cantrell's murder, Nelson was still under parole supervision, a fact that later compounded his legal troubles. On February 26, 2025, a Chatham County grand jury handed down a sweeping indictment against Nelson. The charges were extensive and severe: malice, murder, 2 counts of felony murder, aggravated assault, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a crime. The dual murder charges reflected different legal theories under Georgia law: malice murder for intentionally causing death with malice aforethought, and felony murder for causing death while committing another felony offense. The indictment specifically noted that Nelson did with malice aforethought cause the death of Cantrelle Hayes-Ross, a human being, by shooting her with a firearm. When Nelson appeared for his arraignment on March 4, 2025, his defense attorney requested bond, arguing that Nelson had voluntarily surrendered himself to police and had family ties to the community. The prosecution vehemently opposed any release, presenting evidence of Nelson's history of violence and the calculated nature of the crime. They emphasized the multiple gunshots fired and Nelson's pursuit of Cantrell as she tried to escape. Judge Raymond Henderson's decision was swift and unequivocal. Bond was denied on the grounds that Nelson posed a significant threat or danger to the community and represented a potential flight risk, despite his voluntary surrender. The court cannot ignore the defendant's history of violence, particularly in domestic situations, Judge Henderson stated, nor can we overlook the particularly heinous nature of this crime, committed on the eve of a holiday against a victim who had taken steps to distance herself from the defendant. As Nelson was led back to his cell in the Chatham County Detention Center, the wheels of justice continued turning. For the family of Cantrelle Hayes-Ross, it was a small step toward closure, but the path ahead would be long and painful. If this story has impacted you, please subscribe to help us continue raising awareness about these critical issues. On a crisp November evening, just 3 days after Thanksgiving, hundreds of Savannah residents gathered outside Friend Zone Learning Center. The setting sun cast long shadows across a sea of candles, their flames flickering in the gentle breeze. Handmade signs bearing Cantrell's photo and messages of love dotted the crowd. The candlelight vigil and balloon release, organized by Cantrell's family, quickly grew beyond their expectations. Parents whose children had attended the daycare stood shoulder to shoulder with community activists, local business owners, and residents who had never met Cantrell but were moved by her story. "My daughter was love," Cantrell's father told the assembled crowd, his voice breaking. "She loved those children like they were her own. She loved this community. And we won't let her death be in vain." Cantrell's mother, clutching a framed photo of her daughter, shared memories of a child who had always been determined to make a difference. From the time she was little, she was taking care of others. She'd round up the neighborhood kids and organize games. She'd make sure everyone was included. That's who she was, a caretaker, a protector. As night fell, dozens of white and purple balloons, Cantrell's favorite colors, were released into the darkening sky. The crowd fell silent, watching as they drifted upward and disappeared among the stars. Local officials attended the vigil, including Savannah's mayor, who announced plans for a community task force focused on domestic violence prevention. "Cantrell's story has touched this city deeply," the mayor stated. We must ensure her death leads to meaningful change. For Cantrell's family, these lessons come at an unimaginable cost. Yet they've committed to speaking out, hoping their daughter's story might save others. If you're in a relationship where you feel afraid, please get help, Cantrell's father urged at a community forum held in January 2025. If you see someone struggling, reach out. We lost our daughter because someone couldn't accept that she had the right to say no. We can't bring her back, but maybe we can prevent another family from experiencing this pain. As spring blooms across Savannah in 2025, the legal proceedings against Terrell Nelson continue. Prosecutors have announced they are seeking life without parole, citing the heinous nature of the crime and Nelson's prior history of violence. For those who loved Cantrelle Hayes-Ross, no verdict can fill the void left by her absence. Yet her legacy lives on in ways both tangible and spiritual. The children she nurtured at Friend Zone Learning carry her lessons of kindness and curiosity. Several former employees have opened a new childcare center named Cantrell's Wings, committed to continuing her approach to early childhood education with scholarships for families in need. Her parents have established the Cantrelle Hayes-Ross Foundation, which provides emergency assistance to individuals fleeing domestic violence and advocates for stronger legal protections for victims. Their first initiative, pushing for legislation requiring stricter monitoring of domestic abusers with prior convictions, has gained bipartisan support in the Georgia legislature. Perhaps most powerfully, Cantrell's story has sparked countless private conversations in homes across Savannah and beyond. Discussions about relationship boundaries, recognizing warning signs, and the courage to seek help or offer it to others in need. My daughter lived her life in service to others, her mother reflected at a recent foundation event. She protected and nurtured the children in her care every day. Now, her story is protecting others. That's how we honor her, by ensuring no one else faces what she did alone. As this case continues through the justice system, the true measure of justice may lie not just in the courtroom verdict, but in the lives that might be saved because Cantrell's story was told. Thank you for joining me for this important story. If you know someone who needs to hear this, please share this video, and remember to subscribe for more Crazy Dark Files investigations.